I've been going deep today in the SDR life and common mistakes that we see. Just for everyone's reference, right now it's towards the end of 2024. There's a lot of great momentum in the markets, and historically, regardless of market conditions, January to March, we often see some of the most hiring. Obviously, this year alone, we've had like twice as many students, if not more, break in than the previous 2 years combined. And I know a very common question is, what should I do as an SDR? Today, we wanted to highlight, when you're getting started, actually some of the biggest mistakes, kind of answering the question from the other side of the coin. Chris, I'll hand it over to you to set the agenda for us.
Yeah, and this is kind of like an evolving topic because I think we've obviously been on both sides. We've been SDRs, we've been AEs, we've worked on both sides of the coin, but interestingly enough, there's a lot of things that we've realized over the past year. Like we've grown SDR Accelerator from 10 people to like almost 200 at this point. So there's a lot of things that we've noticed, and especially like with the market. We just recorded another video that was about the market, but we've got 6 things on the agenda today. The first one is not copying top performers, trying to reinvent the wheel, probably the mistake that we see most people make. Second one, not taking action, just taking notes, preparing, as you would say. Not asking questions, not getting through enablement, internal training as fast as possible, not networking, and not working overtime if necessary. So we'll definitely elaborate on that last one because it's a little juicy. But maybe let's jump into the first one. I mean, again, this is a running theme on the channel. We talk about this a lot, but I think just having a dedicated video on this is going to be super helpful. So maybe, I guess I'll let you break it down.
Sure.
Well, what do you think about like not copying top performers, trying to reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, well, I'll go from my own experience too. I don't want to be those people that are like, we've coached hundreds of SDRs, but not like, just for everyone's reference, I got promoted from SDR to account executive in 3.5 months. And certainly there was a lot of like luck and timing involved. I'm not going to say it was like my pure skill, but I will say I came into an environment where our leadership was a lot of former Oracle people who had been at kind of the biggest tech companies in the world. And I intentionally wanted to choose a fast growing startup. And I came into about a 250 person company. And I'm seeing some of these people that they poached from Oracle, or like all of the reps that followed execs from Oracle. And quite frankly, some people who had been there who have like decades long careers in tech sales. I was reading some of their emails and like trying to copy them, right? Because that's my first thought is like, let me go to the most tenured person in the company. And I would read them and I would compare it to a couple people I had been buddies with, some of the other SDRs on the team and on the floor we were in office at the time, that were showing me some of their high performing emails. And I quickly realized, like, just because someone has tenure or because they closed a huge deal does not mean that they're necessarily the best SDR. Like, some of the emails would blow your mind how horrible they were. So that's what I'd say. Like, a few things to break down, at least from my perspective, is there's an objective piece of this, which is like, oftentimes the people who want to be your friend very quickly, or the people who are buddy with you getting started, that have worked at the company, that are not just starting. Like, if you have a friend that you both start on the same day, like, sure, like, be friends with them, maybe learn from them. But oftentimes in the SDR org, what we've seen and what we talk about is sometimes the people most willing to share things don't have that much to say, right? Like, some of the people most willing to give away all their stuff are not the people that have the absolute best performing things. So I think objectively, you need to look at the leaderboard and like really see consistently over a 6 to 12 month trend who are some of the top performers, and go after 1 or 2 of those. And then maybe there's someone who's not like the clear number 1 all the time, but they're always in the top 10 to 20%. And maybe you connected somehow because you both have a sports background or went to the same college or something in that nature. But really, my point being is find 1 to 2, maybe 3 people, but your first 2 to 3 months, just focus on that. It's so easy to take in so many different things. It's so easy to want to set up a one-on-one with every rep or manager at the company to pick their brain and all of that. In reality, you will do a much better job, even if it isn't ultimately your script, of like, if Chris was the number 1 SDR on my team, he's a year ahead of me, I'm going to try and find everything he's doing possible and just copy that as a starting point. And then the things that don't feel natural, I can put my own spin on. But lastly, I'd say, like, notice, I want to make a huge point of emphasis here, and this is one of the biggest mistakes, is that you have a ton of energy, enthusiasm, you want to learn everything about sales. You notice to this point of this monologue, I have not talked once about getting external training, looking at other people's profiles and all of these different things, because that's the biggest thing too, is like, I'm not even knocking training. Like, obviously we work with SDRs literally before they even start their first day, all the way to when they promote to AE in the higher levels platform. If you have one training that's reputable and you want to go that route, absolutely do that. But do not buy frameworks from this person. Do not buy the cold calling masterclass from this person. Do not buy the 7-figure prospecting bootcamp from this person and think that just buying all of these different things and refreshing LinkedIn and going to LinkedIn every morning to find a 700-word post on LinkedIn is going to be advice from top performers. Like, first and foremost, before you're on the phones for the first month or two at least, find 2 to 3 people max at your company that are exceeding quota consistently, and that you should be laser focused on that. Everything else is just fluff, but I'll hand it to you for your thoughts.
No, I mean, I think you covered everything. But I would say, like, I think there is a level of naiveness when people join and they have this idea that they are, like, you know, just superstars and they're going to change everything with this like super shiny strategy. And I think you don't realize until you're in it, when you get into a position where, like, you're no longer hitting your quota and you're in the chopping block, it's not fun. Yeah. And so that's when people realize, okay, shit, I just kind of need to go and, like, listen to what the top performers are doing, or, like, really dig down. I wish more people would just kind of, like, put themselves in a more favorable position. Because, I mean, just think about it. And we talk about this all the time. We started out the course kind of like trying to teach people, like, what to do and what was really making us successful. And honestly, what we've kind of ended up on is, like, hey, instead of that, we're now teaching people, like, how to look internally. Because like, there's a lot of different ways that you can use the tools available inside of your platform, right? Like even me, I think a big reason why I'm always, like, a top performer at the top of the leaderboard is because I'm kind of taking a little bit from everybody. Like, some reps, some AEs, even like when I was an SDR, some people are good at different things. And so I would just literally, like, if somebody was good at cold calling, I mean, fortunately we were lucky enough, and I think most SDR orgs now have, like, these call recording softwares or some sort of, like, log where you can actually just go in and listen to the calls. Yeah. And so I would just literally go in, like, I knew this guy over here, or this person was booking a ton of meetings through the phone. I would just go listen to their calls. And great, like, all of a sudden I was now great at cold calling, right? Instead of me trying to come up with this magic script that would just change the game, I just listened to the cold calls that were actually working, right? Now, there's another element of this. Like, obviously, you can't just take what somebody else is doing and blindlessly apply. You got to make it your own. Yeah. But this is the real path to, like, crushing it, to hitting your goal, and also just being abundant. Because I don't think you're going to come up with good strategies if you're not abundant. If you're thinking of strategies but you're desperate to hit your number and you're, like, on the chopping block, you're not going to come up with a good strategy. Yeah. Like, those strategies come after you understand what is working, and then something else spawns out of that. You know that this is working over here for this person, this is working over here for this other person. Let me find a way to combine that. Yeah. But you're not going to have all that Knowledge and aptitude until you have a little bit of tenure, and until so yeah. Point being is, like, this is the number one mistake that we see people making, is just thinking that they're superstars, thinking that they can just go in and try something entirely new and change the game. And I'm not going to say that nobody does that, but I would say it's probably like 0.5% of people that do that successfully. So save yourself the trouble. Don't do that. Next point, it's just, like, not taking action. You know, people just, and this is tough because we have a very, very in-depth course and we have a lot of students in there, and it's really easy for people to just consume themselves in, like, the training. And regardless if it's, like, internal training, enablement, or anything else, it's really, really easy to just open a Google Doc and sit there and take notes on the market, on the ICP, on all these different things. And it's great. I'm not going to say that's bad. It's not all bad. But then they pick up the phone and somebody tells them to fuck off, and they're like, whoa, what just happened? my last 6 weeks of training are all for, like, a waste of time. And it's like, that's when they realize, okay, it takes an entirely different skill set to actually perform in this role. Yeah. So I'll throw it over to you.
No, for sure. I mean, really great analogy. Like, analysis paralysis, overstudying is a very common thing. But I think for those of you that are either trying to break in or are new SDRs that maybe are gearing up for that first cold call, it's so funny. And I guess what I'm trying to articulate here is what you're missing with studying, in the sense that cold calling is very different. This isn't like a passing a test. You know, my former career is as an engineer, where it's like you truly get things right and the thing you're trying to build works or it doesn't. Yeah. Cold calling sales is a much more different, like, psychological, more of an art than a science kind of thing. And if you're sitting there studying, it's so funny. I see the light bulb flip for a lot of people when they finally make that first call. But if you are procrastinating and waiting, all you are doing is thinking about, how do I say this? What should I do if they say this? All of these different things. And what you're missing completely, which is 10 times more important, is what is this person that is receiving a call that picks up at 3:10 p.m. on a Thursday thinking about? What are they doing? If I was calling someone that was probably busy, but I maybe caught them at a good time to have a conversation, how could I introduce myself in a way that's compelling enough to make them want to have a conversation? And also I might add, like, maybe, hey, at least you're starting to realize you should think about what the other person is experiencing, maybe more than what you're saying in the first place. But even then, again, then I'll tell that to the person that's overstudying, and they're like, that's a great point. Let me map out all these things, right? So I think it's just so important, like, that's one element of it. And then the other one I want to touch on, and feel free to add other color to it as well, is like the other side of this is also early on, it's like trying one thing for 2 days and it's not working. So then you completely throw it away, and now you're on LinkedIn and like copying a script that you saw from someone else, or like all these different things. So I think, again, it's like, this is hard because if you've never been in sales, you are not used to fundamentally losing more than you win, and that being an acceptable thing, right? Like, you will make 100 calls and book maybe 5 meetings. You will, when you get to an AE level, you're going to lose 10 deals for every major deal that you win, right? And so if you're not used to this, whether maybe you don't study all that much and you're good about taking action, but then you're 2 days into this and you haven't booked a meeting yet, and now you feel lost, and it's like, whoa, like, hey, like, if you're copying and staying laser focused and disciplined on what top performers are doing, like we mentioned in our last point, like, stick with it. Give it like 2 to 3 weeks to see actually how, if you can open a call with something that's been proven to work. And then maybe now you, at least because you've been trying the same thing, realize that you can open a call well, but you're not handling, the second or third level questions, or you're not able to get them to a close. But if you're trying a different opener every week, if you're like, so focused on the opener that you're not thinking about the kinds of questions or ways to drive a conversation to ask for a meeting, like, there's so many points. I'll cut myself off because this is getting so hypothetical. Yeah. But that's my point, is like, the part of this is, obviously don't study too much, but also like try something that is proven by other people. And then, as that may not work, like, it's very possible that that's not going to be the secret answer that you need for your entire SDR career, but at least you'll be able to say, this exact point is where I'm consistently failing, and you'll actually be able to fix it, as opposed to thinking too much, practicing too much, or on the flip side, like changing too much, studying any and everything, like whether it's a LinkedIn influencer, another person at your company, blah, blah, blah. So I'll cut myself off.
I think it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like, if you if you just sit in a vacuum and you're taking notes of other people, and you end up with this huge log of like, this is what I need to say to open, this is what I need to say afterward, you end up with this, like, I don't know, it's like this flow that you think is going to be this magical thing that's going to happen every single time. Like, every single call is completely different. Yeah. And so you've got to get out there. And also, like, just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean that it's natural for you. Yeah. And so we were talking about this a little bit the other day of like, if you open a call and you're not comfortable with like how you open it, like, even if somebody else like comes in super high energy, has a specific way of opening the call, or even like in emailing, right? Like, if great, you get somebody like to agree to a meeting, but like, what do you do after that? Yeah. Right? Like, do you fuck it up? Or, I mean, again, that's a little bit like abstract, but like, I think a better example is probably on a cold call. If you copy somebody blindly, if you don't try it for yourself, but you just say, that works, great, let me move forward, right? Before testing it yourself, you're not going to figure it out. That's why it's so important to look at what other people are doing, implement it yourself. You got to take that action. Otherwise, you're going to end up with this huge bundle of mess that you think is going to work on paper, and it just doesn't flow together. Yeah. So 100% make sure that you're actually doing stuff, that you don't end up on the other side of those 6 weeks or 8 weeks of like being outside of your ramp period. AEs do this all the time as well, actually. It's pretty funny. Yeah. It's not just SDRs. AEs even more than SDRs, because you got to actually lead a discovery call. Yeah. And so they'll just sit there and they'll be like, these are the questions I need to ask, And again, we have an entire process for that too, but it's funny. It's not just SDRs. It literally happens for everybody. Yeah. But this doesn't, decrease the importance of it. Yeah. Third one is not asking questions. Just like, just sitting there by yourself, like being, I don't know if it's confidence or if it's being afraid of looking stupid or whatever. But I don't think there's like a better time. You're going to look stupid if you don't ask questions like 2 months from now. Yeah. And then people are going to say, why didn't you ask questions? Yeah. Right? It's like, there's also a level of asking, okay, there's two segments of this. So like, you shouldn't ask too many questions to the wrong people. For instance, like, you don't want to go to your boss and pester them with questions, but you got to figure out like who the people are internally that are willing to help you out, that are willing to ask or answer the binary questions. Like, for instance, like Salesforce, HubSpot, like hygiene, those different things. Like, those are some very simple things that even like middle of the pack performers can figure out. So it's not like you have to go to the top performers solely, right? Maybe the top performers don't want to help you at all. Maybe they don't care about you, right? So you got to figure out like who you can ask and who you can actually get responses or answers from.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
No, I agree. And maybe said another way, or kind of like, if you're new to the SDR AE role, like, or maybe just new to a company in a new position, like what's going to happen here is if you're not asking questions as well, like we definitely advocate you taking on a lot yourself, right? Like be self-driven, try and figure some of this out. But as an example, when you join a company, if you've never been through this, maybe you don't know, but if you have, maybe you're jumping SDR jobs listening now, it's like, you know, that of all of the training you have in your first month, maybe 10% of that you're ever going to use, especially when it comes to the product. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more too. But for instance, like one of the things I did as well is, you know, as an engineer, I had very technical conversations, but I also on occasion was able to actually shadow a sales call or two and saw where that line was of talking too much about the product. So one thing I was very intentional about, aside from just finding top performers when I started as an SDR, was finding someone and saying like, hey, there's a ton of stuff here on the product. Like, what are three major things, or what is, you know, 80% of the time, what are your customers actually focused on? And I guarantee you, whatever company you're at, a rep that's been there for a year, maybe two, and they've either made a ton of cold calls or made a bunch of discovery calls, they will be easily able to tell you if they're actually good at what they do. Yeah, 80% of the time, in reality, most people are looking at us for support and they're looking at us for this other feature. Everything else is like nice to have, but if they don't need that, they're really probably not a qualified buyer, or the pain is not going to be significant enough for them to buy. And obviously that's an oversimplification. There's many ways that people will buy your software for all sorts of reasons. But again, it's like when you're coming in and new and not asking these questions, you're getting on a call and you're like, you may even hear them say some random feature and you may talk to them about it and they're like, oh, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not actually relevant, right? Or you haven't even, you're so focused on learning every possible thing, you're not learning how to navigate situations where you don't know the answer to a highly technical question, right? Especially if you're new to a highly technical environment. So many things I could say, but that's you know, the first thing that comes to mind.
I think there's two segments there, right? Like the first one is obviously like asking questions internally to the people that you have around you, and the second one is also discovery questions in general and like cold calls and different things there. So 100%. Next one is like, you actually talked about it a little bit, but like not getting through enablement, internal training as fast as possible. So again, all of these, like I think you guys can probably see the red thread here. Like they're all very closely intertwined. They all need to be done in conjunction with each other. Like there's a lot of people that will say, oh, awesome, I shouldn't be in a vacuum. Let me just go talk to all the top performers. Yeah. Right. And then they forget about all the other things. But then they also will sit like in internal training or be in this phase. I think it's okay. Like they have 2 months to get through these videos here, so they're doing fine. Let me go chill in the kitchen a little bit. Let me go relax a little bit. Yeah. Right. Like this is like you don't have too much time as a new rep or SDR to really mess around. And before people know it, they're live. They can't spend all the time to like research people, to shadow people. They have to get out there and actually do the stuff. And so this is the problem with a lot of people, is they don't understand it until they've made the mistakes. And they're like, damn, I wish I did that. Yeah. And so how do you tell somebody like, this is what's going to happen? Yeah. Right. Unless they trust us, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, definitely like, and we have like a kind of like a grudge with enablement in general. It's not all enablement, but you've got to ask the critical question of like, do you want to learn from somebody who hasn't done or been in the exact position as you? And like, do you really think that's a valid way to become a top performer? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not going to say that all of the stuff that they teach is not relevant, but sometimes you'll have like, what is it, like 40 hours of training material that could probably be condensed down to like 2 hours or 3 hours of really targeted things that you can do. Yeah. And that's where we always tell people like, go talk to the top performers, go emulate them. They're the people in the field actually doing it. Now, if enablement or your training team, if they've actually been SDRs or reps at the company themselves, then I think that's a different situation because they actually have a track record of crushing it. And those are the enablement people that I love because they have their shit together. They're not just guessing their way to like what they think would make an SDR good. My favorite one is the enablement people that have never sold a day in their lives, that are teaching you how to run anyway, this is turning into like a bitch session about like enablement.
Gotta be careful. Yeah, we're on the record.
But I'm just telling people out there that like, you've got to be critical of like, and this is the same thing, right? Like, who do you listen to? Yeah. Like, even when you're evaluating top performers and middle performers, like, you probably don't want to listen to the bottom of the pack performer on how to hit your number.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same principle here with like enablement. Like this is fun. Like I'm not going to tell you not to listen to what your company is telling you, but I'm telling you, if you want those abnormal results of like the top performers, you're not going to find it in the internal training guidebook that every single SDR goes through.
Yeah.
Like go through it, listen to it, check off like whatever you need to check off, and then get out there and actually learn from the best.
Totally. Yeah, I think as a good proxy, like sales enablement, I've had some good and some very bad experiences. Recently it's been solid, so that's been nice. But I think if you're new to this, it's really easy to put people on a pedestal. You may see someone from sales enablement that's been at the company for 7 years, and every time they get on a call, everyone's like, oh, I don't know, Jamie's here or whoever, like whatever, right? And it's really easy to think everyone is way ahead of you. But to your point, like if they're not on the front lines, you just need to, it's not even that they're not valuable, but you need to understand like what is the most value I can get from this person. And sales enablement, generally the things that help when I'm brand new to a company are all the research and resources they have about why the product is important and how it compares to competitors in the marketplace. But I will say, not naming names here, but there have been several times where, in my opinion, sales enablement oversteps and is like, so when you're on a call with a customer, this is exactly what you should say. Or they have like these pre-recorded trainings where they're like, today we're going to go through a mock discovery call. And they're doing it with the sales enablement person and like the product manager who's acting like a prospect. And it's very curated, it's very manicured, and it's like all the things that they think a call comprises of, but not actual reality when you're on a call and like a prospect is so not interested, or they're not even teaching you how to qualify someone out who's going to waste your time. Like these are the things you're going to learn from recordings, from top performers, and all of these different things. So I think again, and maybe actually one last anecdote too, just maybe a little off script here, but when it comes to like time management, this is a really weird muscle when you're brand new to a company, and I think you need to use your best judgment. But I will say there's a lot of like company culture events or like extra virtual happy hours or all of these different things. If your manager in particular is not attending those, if a fair amount of the tenured SDRs there, like all the new SDRs are going to want to attend that. They think it's a great opportunity to build their brand. Like quite frankly, if you're new to a company and they have like a virtual making margaritas experience at 5 to 6 p.m. and your manager is not there and the other top performing SDRs aren't there and you're busy, don't attend those. And that's really weird, especially the smaller of a company that you're at. Like everyone knows everyone after a while. But there is no shame, quite frankly, as a salesperson. Like if you have better things to do in that hour, do it. Like do not attend those meetings. They are largely, I'm not going to say a waste of time, but they are not productive to you as a salesperson who is striving to achieve quota on a quarterly basis. Yeah. So my 2 cents on that.
No, you're actually, you're segueing into the last 2 points, which is not networking and not working overtime if necessary. So you kind of hit both of those. But yeah, I would say also like people just forget to network and they forget that this is like a long game. Like a lot of people will think, cool, again, all of these are interlaced. And so I'll reach out to the top performers and get answers to everything. No, they don't care. Like they're not gonna, like nobody's going to tell you the answers. Like you're competing directly with these people, right? Everybody's going to be nice to you more than likely, but they're not going to tell you like they don't know you. Why would they tell somebody that they're competing with exactly what they're doing to be successful?
Yeah.
And so you've got to build, like you've got to optimize for a long-term relationship. Like this is what we tell people all the time, especially when somebody like graduates from Ascension, they get a job. They're like, what can I do now? Should I reach out to the SDRs? Like, and it's like you start in 3 months, and like, should I understand what they're doing? And I'm like, you shouldn't jump on a call with somebody and the first thing is like, so what are you doing to be successful? It's like they're not going to tell you, right? Like maybe just get to know them a little bit. It's kind of like, I'm not gonna say dating, but like a little bit, right? It's like you're not gonna ask them to marry you on the first date. Again, I hate like interlacing all those dating analogies and different things, but but I think like network for the long term. Like don't treat this as like purely transactional, and that's part of sales in of itself, right? Like that's actually one of the big pillars of graduating from SDR to being an AE. It's like you can't just like approach everything so transactionally. Like honestly, for me, it's like the less you sound like a salesperson, the more comfortable it is for other people. Now, some people own it. I would say actually you do a really good job of that. Like you're very direct. But I think like when you're meeting somebody for the first time that you have to work with for the next like year, 18 months, optimize for the long thing. Like, it's okay to ask them, like, so what do you think about the company? Tell me, like, give me the tea. Like, just shoot the shit a little bit, right? You don't have to ask them all these questions that you obviously are not going to get, like, a clear answer on.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's
anyway,
fair.
That was a very long way of saying just network.
Well, I think also too, you know, to your point, like maybe also not just saying like the bad part of this, but also what I would do if I was a new SDR here is it's like, keep in mind, to your point, I agree with everything you said, right? It's the long game. You don't want to show up to every single call and be like, hey, what are you doing? Like there's many reasons why that makes you look weak, and also like you're like almost not confident in your own ability. But there's really simple things you can do when you show up for the first time. Like if it's an informal setting, honestly, I would say try and get to know them on more like a life outside of work basis, right? Like maybe there's an in-person happy hour or a virtual happy hour like your first week, you know, attend those, get to know the team. But I think when you're thinking about actually having like more of a tactical conversation with someone, the way that I would approach it if I'm going to a top performer is like doing the basics of not only researching their background, researching their performance, like, you know, kind of like dap them up when you get on the call. It's like, hey, Chris, like, appreciate you taking the time, man. I saw you're like the #1 SDR the last 18 months here. So like, I know you're busy, probably have way better things to do, but like, even just saying that you know that, you acknowledge that. And then again, I would even on, let's say it's the very first time I'm talking to Chris, who's the #1. It's like, dude, you know, get to know them on a personal level, but also, hey man, like I've been listening to a lot of your cold calls on Gong or whatever recording software you have. Like honestly, 10 times better than what Enablement has. I've learned so much from that. It's like, you know, I'm sure I've got a lot to learn, and I'm not trying to ask for like the Da Vinci Code here, but like any other pointers or things that you found like have made you particularly successful. Very low ask. Also showing that you've done a lot of research and already are like, whether or not they give you an answer, you're going to figure it out. So it almost gives them the sense of like, okay, well, they're going to keep listening and they'll figure it out here in a month or two. I'll just give it to them today. Because like, regardless of if I do or not, this person clearly wants it. They're clearly going to become a top performer, right? So those are just small ways that I would actually approach a conversation. And again, I think it's like when you're new as an SDR, you're overwhelmed. You want to be that top performer, or at least, you know, if you actually have some drive, you want to be, you know, the #1, and that's what you're striving for. But I think people let that, like, I don't know what I don't know. I need to, like, everyone is so far ahead of me. And you let that like come across in your body language and the way that you're talking to people in a way that quite frankly makes you look pretty weak, and like makes people skeptical of if they even want to work with you, or, you know, lacking confidence in your long-term abilities. So,
And you'll probably start to see, like, interestingly enough at Vanta, like the other top performers are kind of doing the same things. And so we all kind of like picked up on the fact that like we're all kind of like just looking at each other's stuff. And then like even people that were like hiding certain outreach sequences, like we found ways to get around that. And it's kind of like, we just kind of like bonded over that in the end, because we're all like, we know what we're going to do. We're going to find out. Right. And that's what we teach inside the course too, is like, we're really big on, instead of having to go and beg people to like tell you what they're doing, like learn the tools that you have at your disposal and use those to figure out what people are doing, because you have access to so much data. So much data. And so like your time should be more spent like with these people, just networking and, you know, building almost like a friendship a little bit, because then you can help each other in the future. Like you're not going to pick every single little thing up in those tools that you have, but if you maintain a good relationship with these people, like especially top performers, like sometimes I'll just have like, you know, I'll be out of office, I'll send over a lead to them, they'll send over leads to me. Like there's a lot of the stuff that happens, especially like in a startup setting. And so just optimize for that. Like, you know, don't be so desperate. Right. Like, and I liked your approach too, of like actually coming to the table and not just asking without having some, like, you can even say like, this is what I've been doing. Am I dumb? Like, is there anything I do better? Like, you know, just stuff like that. Like, but if you just show up and like, you haven't done anything, it's the same thing with your manager. Like this is, especially managers hate this. If you're just bombarding them with questions, like there's a limit. You can definitely ask questions to your manager. Like I'm not saying don't do that, but if you're constantly asking questions to your manager about like, what do I do here? What do I do there? It's like, what have you tried to do? Like, have you done anything yourself? Like, have you tried at least? Right? It's like they don't want to babysit you. They didn't hire you because like they didn't hire you so that they could babysit you. They hired you because they thought you had the aptitude and critical thinking to figure this stuff out. They want the lowest maintenance person, if that makes sense. Anyway, last one, not working overtime if necessary. Like, again, I think just getting super comfortable. I'm not saying like overwork yourself, but there's such high ROI in just putting in a little bit extra time, especially in the beginning stages of your SDR tenure, that like, and if you get behind, that's the problem, right? Like it's the scarcity mindset like once that hits, it's really hard to crawl out of it.
Yeah.
And you can either get really far ahead of other people, and you can really impress your managers if you put in a little bit extra time. And obviously, just because you put in extra time doesn't mean that you're doing the right things. So it's not just about sitting there like going through enablement, right? Again, like it's about using all these things that we've been talking about here, or whatever works internally for you, and using that time efficiently and intelligently.
Yeah.
But if you're the type of person that's just like, oh, I don't have to be done with enablement for another 6 weeks. Let me just go watch like the latest season of like, I don't know, like on Netflix.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that's the problem, and something that I see happening a lot. And then a lot of these like onboarding programs are not set up in a way where it's just completely chronological to where like when you're live, you're just an absolute killer and you automatically just close, or not close, but like, you know, book meetings and or a highly proficient SDR.
Yeah.
So put in that extra time up front if you have to. Like it's really, really going to pay dividends in the long run if you do that now and you get ahead.
Yeah.
Because then you can just focus on actually like hitting your number, getting abundant, trying new things, and then you can scale back. That's what I did. I mean, in the end of my SDR tenure, I was just kind of like chilling.
Yeah.
To be honest.
No, 100%. I know, like, for those of you that have seen other episodes of this podcast with Connor Murray, as an example, he's an SDR manager for 2 years, number one SDR at Oracle. Now he's an enterprise account executive. He's saying a lot of the same things, and I felt very much the same way. I just kind of naturally did this, but I think it's like really the first year, I feel like I completely overworked myself. I mean, relative to the average person, right? It really, in hindsight, wasn't even that bad. I would say it's like Monday to Friday, I'm working 10 hours a day, and some of that is like self-education. But then on the weekends, I may be throwing in like a book, or maybe, you know, some courses around, you know, the SDR specific function, or cold calling, or emailing. But I'm making sure that like just because I hit my number is not enough. And I think to, you know, especially in the longevity of an entire tech sales career, like whether it's, you know, I know one of the things I would always do an hour after each day where my calls and emails were done, I'm looking at white papers, I'm understanding the product more, I'm maybe watching a discovery call or listening to it on a walk or run or something in the gym, just to like get those extra reps in, and also like not just being better in the moment as an SDR, but especially that first year or two, it's really preparing yourself to make that jump to AE. So, because I honestly, maybe said another way, it's like it's really easy to become a top performing SDR if you work a solid focused 8 hours a day. Yeah. And if you're listening to podcasts like this, if you're looking into potential courses or books, or just educating yourself all the time on sales, it's just a matter of time until you're the number one SDR. That's not really what this is about. It's once you get a year into it, you will get so good. And quite frankly, you'll reach this point where like 8 to 12 months in, you'll wake up and be like, yeah, I'm like doing all this effort, but I bet if I literally just used this template or just did this instead, it would probably get the same result. And that was definitely a moment for me that we talk about a lot in higher levels. And also, you know, I've mentioned it on other videos and whatnot, where you can get much more efficient and get the same result. And you've put so much work in up front that you really don't need to study the product much, hardly at all anymore. You really, like, I'm not going to say you never stop learning, or I'm not going to say you stop learning as an SDR. Like, you should always be adding a thing or two. But again, it's like the 80-20 rule. It's like 80% of your efforts are going to get, or 20% of your efforts are going to get 80% of the results. And now you can use the rest of that time to network, to study discovery, to start, you know, meeting with account executives and account executive managers of potential people you'd promote into in 6 months. And you can start those conversations and be much more strategic. Whereas the average person is trying so hard to be that number one SDR that by the time maybe you even get into the point where there's an AE opening and they're at 120% and you're at 110, but you've used this extra time that you've created to start those dialogues with managers, with account executives, to where they're like, yeah, I mean, this person's at 120%, but he's at 110 and absolutely killing it. So
I know who that is. Like, yeah, pretty much.
So,
yeah, I would say one more thing. This isn't even really on the agenda, but I would say if I look at the spectrum of our students, like the one single thing that really usually is that catalyst for like top performance really quick is just really strong rep relationships. Yeah. So like a really, really easy thing for you, even if you don't have all these other things down, if you have strong rep relationships, that can save you. Yeah. Like I have seen so many people that are not the best at cold calling, or not the best at prospecting, because they are chill human beings. They have created really, really good relationships with their reps. Their reps will have their backs. Yeah. And obviously this is a little bit like, this is one of those things that is hard for us to talk about because it's a hit and miss. Sometimes you might not even have reps that you support. Sometimes you have complete asswits of like, you know, reps that you have, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But if you are in a position where you can build these relationships up to where, like, even for me, like a lot of my reps, I still talk to them today and they became friends of mine. Yeah. And anytime I needed help, I would be like, hey, is there any low-hanging fruit that we can go after together? Right? Like, hey, this is my situation. Like, I'm not doing so well this quarter. I really need to be super targeted in like the work that I do. Can you help me? Like, can we optimize for super quick results here?
Yeah.
Right? Or even if you just tell, like, over time, I had done so much work for these people. Like, even sometimes there were like marketing things, and this is not necessarily like what I'll be doing in the beginning, but what I'm saying is optimize to get your rep relationships into a point where you quite literally feel like you have a friend, because they will have your back. Even me with like SDRs, I don't care if it doesn't really get into, and I hope management doesn't see this, but like I don't really care if like a meeting is not super qualified. If that means that my SDR will like feel better or will get into a better spot, like it's a mutual relationship, right? If I have their back, they're going to send me more meetings. They know I'm going to help them out. Even if something isn't super qualified, I'm going to go the extra mile to see if it isn't. Because sometimes there are things that could just end up being more qualified than there aren't. And I'm so baffled at some reps that are just like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm not going to take that meeting or whatever else. So it's a two-way street. And it also provides a lot of humility for you when you become an AE. Like, these things matter a lot more than you think. So anyway.
No, I mean, honestly, we could keep going for sure, but I think we'll cut it there. I mean, that's like a really solid overview. And also, like, comment below too if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify. We are on YouTube, so if you do have questions around this, maybe you're starting a new job, like, we're more than happy to help. And just so you know too, the reason we don't run ads on these, whether it's YouTube ads or cut halfway into this podcast episode and talk about Salesforce, is because we actually support ourselves through higherlevels.com. So all good if this podcast is all you're looking for, but we are coaching hundreds of top performers at AWS, at Salesforce, at Oracle. At this point, I think we're owed some Oracle stock, because I think literally we have like 10 top performers at Oracle in our community. But nonetheless, if you're looking to break in to become a top performing SDR, or you're an account executive looking to get to that enterprise level, we do have communities for all of those at higherlevels.com. But nonetheless, hope you guys got a lot out of it, and we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.